Welcome to Grail Country. We are launching a new journey today. We have finished with our series on Meditations on the Tarot. And so I've gathered together here with me today Sherry and Ted. And we may be, I don't know if Michael is, I got the impression from Michael's message that he's just not going to be able to do this one because he's too busy. So I don't think we'll be seeing Michael at all. I did invite the poet David Russell Mosley, who has been on the channel before. We've been exchanging messages back and forth. He just wrote a new collection of poems that is actually inspired by the Divine Comedy.
Oh wow!
Fortuitously enough, and he had reached out to me about coming on the channel to talk about his new volume of poetry. And I said, wow, your timing is very interesting, David, because we're actually getting ready to launch a new series about the Divine Comedy. And so I actually invited David. We'll see if David is interested in joining us. So I think we've got a fourth chair that's open, it looks like.
Great.
So we might invite somebody else into this as we go forward. But I wanted to talk a little bit before we start about what I envision us doing for this series. And essentially, my idea is that I want to approach each canto of the Divine Comedy the way in which Tomberg approached the Arcanum of the Tarot in Meditations on the Tarot, where you are allowing the thing to present itself to you and trying to allow the image to guide you to the vision. And because I think that's what Dante's doing, is that Dante is he's laying out a vision and he's trying to plant the images that will allow you to see what he sees. So I want to, as much as possible, to try to look with Dante through these cantos toward the vision that he's pointing at. So that's what I propose. And in some ways, that gives Sherry a little bit of a leg up because she's approaching Dante for the first time in this series. Whereas Ted and I have read him before, so we come with some preconceived notions. And I talked to Ted a little bit off camera, and we're going to, as much as much as we can manage, we're going to try to set our preconceived notions aside as much as possible and come to the text as fresh as we can. And Sherry has promised to let us know when we're bringing our preconceived notions into the conversation and to put us back on track.
If I can discern them.
So as we go through the series, we're gonna take turns reading out loud normally, but since Sherry has not had a chance to read before we're coming together today, I'm just gonna go ahead and let her do the reading for us today. And you'll be able to follow along with us. As you can see, I've got my screen shared. We're reading from the translation that is available online through the digital Dante. And it is the Longfellow translation is the tab that we have it set to. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into Canto
Alrighty.
1. So the plan is to have you read the canto, and then after you're done reading them, we can discuss it. And God willing, I'm hoping we get to Canto 2 today. The pacing that I have in mind is to try to do 2 cantos per episode, but
so Dante,
I'm not going to artificially end a conversation that's productive either. So
Dante's walking through the forest, and you're going to be running through it.
And I do. Before we actually dive into the poem, if either of you have,
okay, here we go.
Before we dive into the poem, if either of you have like your own introductory remarks, I would be happy to hear what you have to say before we just go ahead and dive in.
Mm-hmm. I would just, one of the things, I think I'll bring this up particularly because we're talking about Longfellow, because Longfellow tends to be pretty like romantic in the way that he writes it. I mean, it's kind of flowery, and again, here's my one little preconceived notion. It's not even preconceived notion. It's just what I don't speak Italian, so I couldn't make this judgment. But my understanding from everyone else, all the way back to when Dante wrote the Divine Comedy, was he just wrote it in very straightforward Italian. So it's not it's not Paradise Lost with this like crazy flowery. It's very, his language is very straightforward. And I think that if you're going to do anything with Dante, like lay aside the fact that this is arguably like it's one of the greatest poems, if not the greatest poem of the Western canon, fine, but that doesn't mean that it's above you. And so like, just try to try to hear it like someone's telling you a story, because it's a story.
Yeah, and at some point,
well, that's how I'm going to read it, because I haven't even read it yet.
There we go. At some point, I might share with our audience the video I shared with you before we started, so that people can get a sense of what it sounds like in the original Italian. Yeah. And yeah, I would say it's interesting. Like the best lesson I ever got in poetry was from a poetry instructor I had in college, who just like kind of drilled it into my head that poetry is rooted in the image. Yeah. And actually adjectives make it hard. Adjectives take away from images. It's better to just let things speak for themselves, and than to color it too much with adjectives. And so Dante uses very few adjectives, which is the way in which that his Italian is straightforward. For the most part, there are though parts of it where he does use more adjectives. Like in this introductory canto, he uses more adjectives than in the rest of the poem. So, in any case,
Harry, save us from ourselves.
Okay, you guys done now? Are you done yet? Okay, here we go. Midway upon the journey of our life, I found myself within a forest dark, for the straightforward pathway had been lost. Ah me, how hard a thing it is to say what was this forest savage, rough and stern, which in the very thought renews the fear. So bitter is it, death is little more. But of the good to treat, which there I found, speak will I of other things I saw there. I cannot well repeat how there I entered, so full was I of slumber at the moment in which I had abandoned the true way. But after I had reached a mountain's foot, at that point where the valley terminated, which had with consternation pierced my heart, upward I looked, and beheld its shoulders vested already with that planet's rays which leadeth others right by every road. Then was the fear a little quieted that in my heart's lake had endured throughout the night which I had passed so piteously. And even as he who with distressful breath forth issued from the sea upon the shore turns to the water perilous and gazes, so did my soul that was still fleeing onward turn itself back to re-behold the past, which never yet a living person left. After my weary body I had rested, the way resumed I on the desert slope, so that the firm foot ever was the lower. And lo, almost where the ascent began, a panther light and swift exceedingly, which with the spotted skin was covered o'er. And never moved she from before my face, nay, rather did impede so much my way, that many times I to return had turned. The time was the beginning of the morning, and up the sun was mounting with those stars, that with him were what time the love divine. At first in motion set those beauteous things, so were to me occasion of good hope, the variegated skin of that wild beast, the hour of time and the delicious season, but not so much that did not give me fear, a lion's aspect which appeared to me. He seemed as if against me he were coming, with head uplifted and with ravenous hunger, so that it seemed the air was afraid of him. And a she-wolf, that with all hungerings seemed to be laden in her meagerness, and many folk has cause to live forlorn. She brought upon me so much heaviness with the affright that from her aspect came, that I the hope relinquished of the height. As he is who willingly acquires, and the time comes that causes him to lose, who weeps in all his thoughts and is despondent, even such made me that beast without in peace, which coming on against me by degrees, thrust me back thither where the sun is silent. while I was rushing downward to the lowland. Before mine eyes did one present himself, who seemed from long continued silence hoarse. When I beheld him in the desert vast, have pity on me, unto him I cried, whiche'er thou art, or shade, or real man. He answered me, not man. Man once I was, and both my parents were of Lombardy, and Mantuans by country, both of them. Sub Julio was I born, though it was late, and lived at Rome under the good Augustus, during the time of false and lying gods. Or is that eyeing? Eyeing gods.
Lying.
What's that?
It's lying.
It's lying?
Gods.
Okay.
Lying gods.
A poet was I, and I sang that just son of Anchises, who came forth from Troy. After that, Ilion the superb was burned. But thou, why goest thou back to such annoyance? Why climbest thou not the mount delectable, which is the source and cause of every joy? Now art thou that Virgilius, that fountain which spreads abroad so wide a river of speech? I made response to him with a bashful forehead. Oh, of the other poets' honor and light, avail me the long study and great love that have impelled me to explore thy volume. Thou art my master and my author, thou. Thou art alone the one from whom I took the beautiful style that has done honor to me. Excuse me. Behold the beast for which I have turned back. Do thou protect me from her, famous sage, for she doth make my veins and pulses tremble. Thee it behooves to take another road, responded he when he beheld me weeping, if from this savage place thou wouldst escape. Because this beast at which thou criest out suffers not anyone to pass her way, so doth harass him that she destroys him, and has a nature so malign and ruthless that never doth she glut her greedy will, and after food is hungrier than before. Many the animals with whom she weds, and more they shall be still, until the greyhound comes, who shall make her perish in her pain. He shall not feed on either earth or pelf, but upon wisdom and on love and virtue. Twixt Feltro and Feltro shall his nation be. Of that low Italy shall he be the savior, on whose account the maid Camilla died. Euryalus, Turnus, Nisus of their wounds. Through every city shall he hunt her down, until he shall have driven her back to hell, there from whence envy first did let her loose. Therefore I think and judge it for thy best. Thou follow me, and I will be thy guide, and lead thee hence through the eternal place, where thou shalt hear the desperate lamentations, shalt see the ancient spirits disconsolate, who cry out each one for the second death. And thou shalt see those who contented are within the fire, because they hope to come whene'er it may be to the blessed people. To whom then, if thou wishest to ascend, a soul shall be for that, then I more worthy. With her at my departure, I will leave thee. Because that emperor who reigns above, in that I was rebellious to his law, wills that through me none come into his city. He governs everywhere, and there he reigns. There is his city and his lofty throne. O happy he whom thereto he elects. And I to him, poet, I thee entreat, by that same God, whom thou didst never know, so that I may escape this woe and worse, thou wouldst conduct me there, where thou hast said, that I may see the portal of St. Peter, and those thou makest so disconsolate. Then he moved on, and I behind him followed.
Thank you, Sherry.
Yeah.
Wow.
Go ahead, Ted.
Oh my goodness. I mean, sort of what's not here. I mean, the first thing that strikes me is, you know, the movement that's going on here, right? So Dante wakes up and finds himself in the dark woods, and then he looks up and he sees He sees this mountain peaked with sunlight. So he's like in this dark place, and he can't see the sun, but the sun's illuminating the top of the mountain, right? At early morning, and so he thinks, oh yeah, this is it. Like I can get out. I can be saved. And he takes off up the mountain, and like he starts getting menaced by these beasts like that are successively worse, right? There's the leopard, and it's a thing it's scary, but it's also beautiful. And then you get the lion that's, well, it's like much more, it's like clearly dangerous. What is it that even the air was afraid? It made the air seem afraid. And then finally this horrible ravenous wolf that there's nothing good in. And he's like driven back down into the woods. And that movement, like how many of us haven't felt that at some point in our lives? Just in terms of things to connect with, like, you know, midway through this life's journey, I woke to find myself in the dark. It's like, if you want to talk about a human statement, man, that's
he
a human.
Doesn't say but Ted, he doesn't say through this life's journey, midway through
our life's journey. Thank you, Nate. That's actually a great point. Yeah, midway through
he
our
starts with the second person, and then he shifts to the first person.
Yeah,
immediately after that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
But I just think like how many things in my life do I start out on and I think, oh, this is it. You know, we're going up the mountain. Here we go. And then this just like the stuff starts coming out of the woodwork. You know, the beast starts showing up. And so I don't know, like to think, well, what is this saying? Like this is setting up like how do we resolve that? How do we resolve the fact that, you know, there's the thistles and thorns and that we fall asleep and walk off the true way. Right? To me this sets up like these are the things
there's an invitation to take courage, I think.
Absolutely.
Like,
absolutely.
And he's drawing his courage from Virgil, and he's inviting us. That's why he starts. So he starts with our. He starts with like that second person reference, our. So it's like he's letting you know, I'm offering to take you on this journey with me.
Yeah.
That I took. So, but then he's like, but this is my journey that I talk about, and then he talks about, and then he ends with he's following Virgil. So he's inviting us in turn to follow him.
Yes. Yeah. Which there's so many things I want to say regarding the rest of it, but
can I just give you?
Yeah.
Can I just give you an impression of like, so this is what I envision when I was reading that part up to the, you know, before he meets Virgil, is that he wakes up in this dark wood and he sees the way out. And he tries to go there, but then he's confronted with all these wild animals. But they don't seem to threaten him in any real way. He's hindered by his own fear of them, right? And so
yes,
they it's like to me, it's like they stand guard. Mm-hmm. It's like they stand guard to push him back to where he was, right? Because he needs to be there. Like, it's not that they actually pose a real threat. The threat lies within him. Like,
yeah, they
it's his
very
own
much present
fear,
themselves to
right?
me as threshold guardians, Sherry. I agree with you.
Sorry, say that again.
Yeah.
They very much present themselves to me as threshold guardians. Like, and so like it's like he is it, and you're right to point to his fear. And in fact, in the next canto that we're getting ready to read, that idea that it is his fear, it gets reinforced by Virgil, because like basically like Virgil takes him at the task for cowardice.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah, because he says here, he says go ahead.
Oh, there's just I was going to start diving in a little bit the connection between Virgil and Dante, but if you're their relationship. But Sherry, why don't you go with what you're going with?
Well, I wanted to read the one little stanza where I see that as a like where I see them as threshold guardians. Is it says, which coming on against me by degrees thrust me back thither where the sun is silent. Yeah. So he seems to be saying that because of their presence, he was pushed back into the dark wood, right?
Yes.
So anyway, that's all I wanted to say.
Well,
That's good.
Yeah, I want to pick up on that though, because you know that's already introducing this notion that the primary thing, that the real, there's this like the external and internal journeys, right? And that the external is, let's say, a mirror of the internal journey that Dante's going through, and so the fact that it's this fear that drives him back from ascending the mountain. It's like, in one sense, there's nothing keeping him from the mountain, and then in another sense, like the thing that's keeping him from the mountain is exactly the thing he's going to have to deal with. And so thinking about, and let me know if this is getting into preconceived notion territory, but what happens when he gets driven down into the woods is he sees this shadowy figure, right? And that shadowy figure is Virgil. And so the thing that he holds on to is this great poet who's never been, let's say, present in the body form, because he died like 1,300 years before Dante was born into this world. And so that's like very much a description of what Virgil was for him, right? And so if you think of his life as the dark woods, and he looks around and there's nothing to hold on to, and then all of a sudden he sees this thing glimmering in the shadows, because he's given up on what heavenly ascent and virtue.
Well, but what do poets help? Like Ted, this should present itself to you from the conversation that we had, right?
Yeah.
Like, what is the primary thing that poets do?
They witness.
They help. Well, yeah. They help you. They help us to see.
Yes, exactly.
They help us to see what's really there.
Yes.
So this is, and so of course Virgil is his guide.
Of
like
course,
who else would his guide possibly be but the poet that has inspired the poet?
Yes.
Like the poet that had helped the poet see, like so.
Yes.
So you helped me to see, and now I have to try. To attempt to see more clearly than because I found myself in this place where I'm lost and confused.
Yeah.
And so who else am I going to follow but the poet who helped me to see in the first place?
Well, so there's a couple things there. One is that's interesting.
So here's.
Oh,
are we having a lag? We must be having a bit of a lag.
I don't know.
Yeah, there's often a latency.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that to that point,
Yeah.
Nick, we've already got it set up that Dante is going to see more than Virgil ever could, which is just an interesting thing to be throwing out there. He's like, I will walk you through these two kingdoms that you will see, that you and I can see together, but like there's this place that's past me. And so, there's this sense of propelling him forward, and just the titles that this is something to pay attention to as we continue forward. The titles that Dante uses for Virgil, it's incredibly poignant and beautiful. And so he starts out. What does he call him? He says, "My master and my author." Is that the two ways that he refers to him in this canto? Thinking about, and so, but to your point of who else would show him, and I would say, again, I think historically, the notion that it's going to be a poet that's going to lead him to heaven, towards heaven, it's not a holy man and it's not a prophet, right? That's really interesting. Like that'd be something to think about, like it, especially in some other things that we'll get into.
Well, yeah, especially, and we'll get it. Let's hold that thought for the canto too, which is coming up, because like Dante actually addresses that in the next canto. Like he specifically, he defends like why this, like
it seems pretty obvious.
Okay. Sherry,
go
for
Let's get
it.
The obviousness.
Yes, it seems kind of obvious to me why a poet would be doing that, because the poet is marries heaven and earth, right? And so the poet makes everything, like this is why Barfield talks about language as being poet, like it's originally poetic, right? Because it's incarnational. And so the poet is literally mediating, and that's what Virgil's doing. He's mediating between heaven and earth.
Is
and
this the reason? Oh, go
but
ahead.
I just wanted to say what's interesting about I just want to make it's interesting that, first of all, Dante is where he is because he has lost the straight and narrow. Okay, so that's number one. So he's fallen off the path, right? He's lost his way, and secondly, he's in the dark. So and that's always, I love that kind of imagery, because what it indicates is that you can't see. Like when you're in the dark, you can't see. There's no light, right? So I'm expecting, but I don't know because I haven't read the poem. But I'm expecting there to be shapes that he misunderstands, things like that happening, as we go on, because of the darkness, right? And so to have someone like the poet who sees, right? He's going to act as the guide because he can see in the dark, literally, right? And Dante can't because he's in the dark, and he's in the dark because he lost his way off the path, right? And it's interesting because I'm seeing some Lilith imagery in here, and it's interesting because I didn't know Dante, but the leopard, the spotted leopard, and stuff like that. That's all in Lilith as well. And
well, for fun,
Nodos in
I think
Fantastes.
those are actually the beast he gets from Jeremiah. So they're biblical references.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Because
Lilith come. I just wanted to say Lilith takes on the shape of a leopard, right? A spotted leopard. But there's a secondary female character in the story that takes on the shape of a leopard, and I'm not going to say more than that because it's, yeah. But yeah, okay, that's good for me. I'm tapping around in the dark here. So.
This is exactly what I have in my mind. I like the fact that we're going to the images, and we're saying what the images present to us. Like this is without preconceived notions. So, and in fact, on that note, well, two things. There are a couple things I wanted to say, and there's a little bit of latency, and I'm sorry I almost interrupted you because of that latency.
It's okay.
I wasn't intending to. The first thing that occurs to me is when they're talking about the poet is the one who sees. I'm wondering, if when I'm wondering if there's a way in which God feels a closeness to the poet. I'm wondering if when God says that David is a man after his own heart, if it's not because David is a poet.
Maker. Hello.
That's the thing.
Poet means maker. Nate.
There you go. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm getting it's really hard for me to track right now. There's a really bad delay. So I got you. You said that poet means maker.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
You pick. You know what's weird is that.
That's weird, eh?
Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, there's a South American this is by this point we're so widely diverged from the psalmist, but you even end up with a South American poet saying El poeta es un pequeño Dios, like the poet is a little God.
Yeah. Right.
But at some point maybe we can bring this in. I just had a wonderful conversation with a professor this morning about Gerard Manley Hopkins and the connection between his poetry and his ability to understand sacramentality and the Eucharist. And so there really is, but so there's this notion of poetry as this thing that's, let's say, becomes the mediation of grace in Dante's life. I wonder, again, I'm sorry if there's any preconceived notions here. I wonder how much that's simply because Dante is a poet. Is it that poetry is the thing that saves people, or is it that the place in which Dante has, let's say, not given up on reality, it's the thing that he holds on to, that's the reason it becomes the mediation of grace. Does that make sense?
No, I think, Ted, I think that what you're saying is important, because I think poetry is somehow, it's poetry is wonderful, but poetry is somehow lesser than song, because song points to something deeper than poetry does, because song points toward. Go ahead, Sherry. I only was about half finished with that thought, but if you have something to add, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Sorry, Nate. Yeah.
it's okay. I know
Go
that
ahead.
the delay is making it hard. I totally understand. So and that has to do with like it has to do like because it has to do with the way that music is like music is it's a very deep metaphor because there's a way in which the way we live our lives is music, right? So it's like it's pointing us toward that kind of like the way that this is. I think you'll understand this. It's the way you think of the way that McDonald talks about truth in his reflection on I Am the Truth, where he's reflecting on what it means for truth to be a person, right? So poetry is what poetry does is poetry can help point toward people toward the music of their lives, but the music of their lives is the greater thing. And the gift
Yes.
of the poet is to be able to give people an image of that points them toward it. So that the image becomes connecting. So the image becomes connected to the hearing. So you're able to both see and hear, right? So you're able to see the world with clearer eyes through the poetic image, but then that opens you to hear the voice of the deeper music.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense at all?
Can I say something?
Go for it, Sherry.
Can I can I say something?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm wondering if having your screen shared is causing the delay, first of all. That's the
Oh,
one
let's
thing.
stop. Yeah, let's stop sharing the screen now.
But I don't know.
Let's try it.
Let's just see what happens. Yeah. And then about the music and the poetry. So I've been writing poetry all my life. Like as soon as I picked that book up that I told you guys about before. And before that, before I could write, I sang. So I would sing. And um and it was often in mostly times of loneliness or sadness or whatever. I would sing. And one of the things that has been impressing itself on me recently is that we don't realize that it's actually out of our feelings that we live. We live and speak out of our feelings. And a really easy example of this is depression. Okay. If you are depressed, that is how you live and speak. You live out of that place, right? And so when we're not aware of it, we don't take note of it, so to speak, until it makes itself known to us, right? And so I think that the feelings and if you guys disagree with me, please say this, but I think that they are the vibrations of our life, which is the resonance with which we reciprocally resonate with the rest of the world. And that's why music is primal, right? Because we actually live on a level of vibration with the world. And so to me, those are what our feelings are. Our feelings, because we actually feel, like physically feel our feelings, right? Like they move in our bodies. They can vibrate our bodies. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but yeah, I'll just stop talking.
Look.
But there's a feeling right there. I just laughed. I just laughed, and that vibrated my whole body, right? I can cry, and that, there's there's a there's a there's a connection between resonance, vibration, and feeling. And if you think about that as the place from which you speak and articulate, then I think that's why music is primal. It's a natural thing to want to sing out, even in grief. Like people wail in grief, right? And they sing out in happiness, and they wail out in sadness. So anyway, that's it.
I'm not gonna go into any of what these things are gonna be, but I will tell you that pretty much everything that Nate and Sherry said are going to be things that are completely worth paying attention to through the rest of the Divine Comedy. So light and dark, right? The sun, where the sun is there light? Where's the light coming from? Like, incredibly important throughout it. Silence, singing, and let's say unpatterned noise. Silence, singing, and noise. Like, pay attention to those. They're incredibly important the whole way through. So the stuff that you guys are touching on, I mean, this is the foundation of this poem in a lot of ways. And it's almost the kind of thing where you can't see it. Like, it's working on you. And the last thing, Sherry, you're talking about this connection between feelings and trying, broadening that out, that like, it's like how we're feeling things out, and that relationship between your soul and your body is also a tremendous theme throughout this. And particularly, think about like eyes and mouths, what happens with those when Dante meets people. All this is super, super important. There's going to be 1,000 things that he's going to say with it, explicitly and implicitly. And so those are all really, really like good things to have in mind, I think, moving forward with the poem, because Nate, to your point too of images, right? What are these images for? That's not even anything that we haven't read yet. I mean, Virgil himself is an image, right? Because this isn't Virgil. This is a poetic image of Virgil. And he says what his function is, right? Images all have functions appropriately. And the function of Virgil is to bring Dante to this other spirit who's going to take him to heaven, right? Like, that's the function of Virgil, is to get him to heaven. That's what the function of these images are, is to get you to the thing that is, let's say, bringing forth the image.
That's a great transition, Ted, because where I would like to direct this back, if we could, for a moment, is to take a look at some of the images that occur here.
Yeah.
And to see what. So I'm going to start. I'm going to ask a question. Well, 2 questions. Maybe just. I think I can make it 1 question. My question is that why do either of you have a sense as to why it is that the image of the she-wolf seems more terrifying to Dante than the leopard or the lion? Why is it the image of the she-wolf that is particularly
I don't have my
terrifying for
text
him?
up here.
Yeah. They go ahead and take their time.
Where did my
your time
text
to pull it
go?
up if you want. I think Longfellow calls it a panther, but then he points out that it's spotted, so he's talking about a leopard. The translation that I read before, the translation that I was reading from before here actually translated as leopard. So
I'm just gonna, and while Sherry's pulling that up, I'm gonna just share a really fun story, which is that my mother makes a lot of quilts, and they're usually just kind of log cabin quilts. So it's a lot of like doing color stuff. It's not like the complicated quilts. But she made me a Dante quilt that is all the colors of the dark forest. It's got 1 square of leopard print. It's got an embroider. It's got a pattern that had a lion on it, and then there's an embroidered wolf on it, and it's got some lines from Canto I embroidered around the edge of it. So right. That's just a fun. It's the 3 beasts.
Well, here's what's interesting to me, and I haven't actually. I'm going to bring this up because I actually haven't seen this in any commentary.
Okay.
This is just this is coming from my own intuition, and I wonder why other commenters haven't talked about this. Because we have all of this imagery of the founding of Rome that comes through the introduction of the character of Virgil.
Yes.
And references to the Aeneid, right?
Yes.
But and also to like that Italy is being torn apart.
Yes.
But the thing is, of the beast, the one that he is most afraid of is the she-wolf. But the she-wolf is of the creatures. The she-wolf is the one that has the strongest association with Rome. Because it was a she-wolf who raised Romulus and Remus.
Okay, maybe that's what it is.
Yeah. Well, okay. Can I shoot something at you and tell me if you're
Well,
getting a feel?
okay, here's what I'm thinking.
Go for it, Sherry.
I just want to say quick what I'm thinking about the she-wolf, because it's going to be farmer speak. The wolf is not necessarily a threat to human life, but it's a threat to human existence because it can pick off all your livestock in no time, right? And if that happens, then you can no longer thrive. And so I imagine at this point in time, when this is being written, that if you had a handful of cows or a handful of sheep, that meant that you were going to thrive. And if they were gone, you were dead. Like you were literally, that was the end of your life. You can't just live on carrots and celery, right? Especially in the winter. So, and if you wanted to continue with your idea of Rome would do that, right? They'd tax you into the ground. They would take away your land. They would take away your sons. So, and you couldn't, for war, and you couldn't farm. Like they would act like the wolf in that sense, right? Where they would just be picking off little by little, picking off your existence. So that's my thought.
What he says is the poem about the she-wolf that he's so terrified, that he's clearly more terrified of than the other beasts.
Yeah.
Is that she devours with the hunger that is never satiated.
Yeah.
It says seemed to be laden. Sorry.
What? No, it's okay.
It seemed the she-wolf,
yes,
that with all hungerings seemed to be laden in her meagerness. What do you think he means there? Like I have an image of a very thin, like wolves are often thin and lanky.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And hungry.
So she eats and eats
right?
and eats, but she doesn't ever. Yeah, but right. Yet she remains thin, and her hunger is never satisfied. So it's just like this hunger that is all devouring and will never have an end.
Can I read the Chiardi translation of it? Because
which is what the government, feels like.
which is better, and hopefully, once Sherry has a copy, we can go back to using the Chiardi translation.
He says, and down his track a she-wolf drove upon me, a starved horror, ravening and wasted beyond all belief. She seemed a rack for avarice, gaunt and craving. Oh, how many of the souls she had brought to endless grief.
So much better translation.
Yeah, I know. I really love Chiardi, but there's this notion of I think part of it is, and I can't tell how much I'm reading into this because of but so stop me. But there seems to be something about the leopard and the lion that there's sort of if you deal, like, they're dangerous if you get too close to them, right? There's this sense of they're violent animals.
Yeah, that's right, because that's exactly the right sense, because it's like he sees them and he's afraid of them, but it's like he feels like he can back away and be safe. But the she-wolf, he's just overwhelmed by the image of the she-wolf. Like, it's
so maybe again, this is maybe where I'm getting too far off from where we are so far. But the leopard and the lion are something like these, like, intrinsic dangers to good things, right? So secondary goods are dangerous to us in certain ways. But the she-wolf is this. It's the totally turning inward of things. It's not even a good that you have to be careful of. It's the thing that will just eat you alive. Right? It's like the difference between managing eating chocolate and using heroin. It's like chocolate is a good, like, don't eat too much of it. And but then there's this other thing that'll just, like, you touch it and it'll just, there's no end. There's no end to how far down it'll drag you.
Now, okay, so now I think I see here in what you just said, Ted, I think I can see the connection to Rome. Because from what you just said, you can see there's an easy line to get to there, you can see where the she-wolf would represent our tendency to see power as an idol.
Yes.
Which we can, and power, can we ever have enough of it? When power is our idol? No. Are we ever satisfied?
No.
Right? Do we ever have enough, or something that is a stand-in for power, that represents power, like money? Can we ever grow the money pile big enough to be satiated? No, we can't. And that's why it does in fact have a, it does in fact properly have an association with pagan Rome.
With pagan Rome. And so now is a great time to bring up, right? So you've got the she-wolf, and then you get this prophecy of the greyhound that's going to come and drive out the she-wolf and restore Italy, right? Good Italy, right? It's the Italy that Camilla and Turnus and all these other heroes from the Aeneid died for.
And Chardy has a footnote tying it to some historical Italian figure, and I think his footnote is bullshit.
Yeah,
I'm serious. Like,
because we're always waiting for the gray wolf, for the greyhound. Like
right.
Yes, the greyhound. And so you see, well, it's right. There's the infernal city and the heavenly city, and we've already seen them set up. Yeah, but contrasted over and over. The greyhound is the good king, and the wolf is
right.
The wolf is whatever's there if the good king isn't there.
This is a messianic figure.
Absolutely, 100%.
Well, but I think it's worth thinking about the characteristics of wolves, because wolves are what makes them, like I said, what makes them so dangerous is that they pick off your existence, which is what a government will do, right? What a tyranny will do. It'll pick off your existence little by little. It's never satisfied, right? It's always hungry. And wolves are I've had encounters in real life with wolves, and they actually will appear out of nowhere, and you look away for a second and they're gone, and you don't even know how they did that. Like, it's like they show up and they disappear, and they're, you know, like one time I took Grain out to feed my cows, and I went out with the snowmobile. I had to go way back out on our property, and I'm standing there and it's dark. It's in the wintertime. And I got one of those flashlights with the handle on the top, and I'm standing there and I'm pouring out grain for the cows. And all of a sudden I hear, ooh, and it's right there. And then all around me.
And of course,
and they're all right there. And I can't see them, right? Like, they're just all around me. And I remember just freezing and feeling completely terrified because of the fact that they're hidden. And yeah, anyway. So wolves have, the way that wolves operate, they're very ghost-like. They even sound like a ghost. Okay?
Yeah. Sherry, hold on to that notion of the hiddenness of it. The hiddenness of the she-wolf as we move through hell. I think that's a really good thing to keep in mind. And again, the difference between the gaudy or the violently majestic lion versus this sort of, I mean, even especially in the Charity, right? She's a wasted horror, like she's starved, so that you like rail thin. You know, think about that mangy, nasty dog that you look at and you just think, you'd probably take my arm if I turned my back on you for a second, because you're, you know, and that, you know, that the notion too, there's this weird notion there that, you know, it's like she's bred with all these other animals. Like, that's a really weird image. It doesn't sound like she's mothered anything.
Yeah,
but she's always breeding.
She's bred, but hasn't mothered. Yeah.
Those are some just good things to sit with, I think, because, and I'll just say this, even if you do go to the commentaries on these animals, everyone's divided. And so don't think they're like an image to unlock. It's not, these aren't one-to-one correspondences here. Just sit, like, you're going to get what you need, what Dante wants you to get from them if you just sit with them. Just sit with them. And stuff will ping around with it. That's great. Yes. But don't be like, oh, I just need to understand that the gray wolf is, say, government corruption. The she-wolf. It's like, no. I mean, yes, but no.
But not just that. Yeah.
No.
But not just that. Exactly.
No, because it's multivalent, right? Like that kind of corruption, that kind of hiddenness. Like you use the image of heroin. Heroin is the same thing. There's a hidden danger in it, right?
She represents a spiritual danger too.
And the way that it eats.
Sorry,
the way that it eats away at you is also hidden.
I'm so sorry, Sarah. I'm really not trying to talk over you. Like, I'm being totally victimized by the delay right now. I'm so sorry. I totally like what you were saying was super interesting.
It's okay.
Okay. And I was hearing this pause that was not there. So sorry. But what I was gonna say is like, yeah, she definitely represents like a clearly spiritual danger too. And you can. This becomes obvious when you think about like, well, Christ is the shepherd, right? Well, what is the number one predator?
It's the wolves.
Sheep?
It's the wolves. Yes.
Yeah.
It is the Antichrist in some sense. In when you're talking about the Good Shepherd, this is the Antichrist.
Yep.
I love that, Nate. Thank you.
Which is why they reduced the Greyhound.
Yes.
Who's prophesied to destroy the she-wolf.
Yes.
To reduce it to a historical medieval Italian figure is silly. It's like, no. I'm sorry.
Well, the Greyhound is Aragorn. The Greyhound is Aragorn.
Or King Arthur, or...
Yes. Thank you. Yes. Right? It's Charlemagne. It's the Greyhound is Charlemagne. Yes. It is that figure which most approximates Christ Pantocrator in this world.
Bingo.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
well. It's also not a mastiff.
By the way, which doesn't mean the historical footnote is wrong.
Yes, thank you.
I'm
Nate.
just saying
yes.
we can't reduce it to that.
Yes, that's exactly right.
But we can't just say Dante is talking about this historical figure in Italian politics of his time, and just stop there and like, oh, that's it. That's all there's going on here. No. There's a lot more going on here.
Yeah. Sorry, Sherry. We lag cut you.
Well, I was going to say it's also not a mastiff. It's a greyhound. Greyhound has a very specific purpose, right? A mastiff would stand like a bulwark against a predator, for example, whereas a greyhound would put the chase on it and it would never run out of steam, right? So, like I have dogs that are, they're actually bred. They're part mastiff, part greyhound. Like they're a very old, ancient Turkish breed, and so they have that, bulk, but they're super fast and they can run for a long time. And the purpose of the greyhound being bred into them is not to catch up with the predator. They will kill a predator if they can catch up to it, but it's to push the predator so far back that it will never return, right? To give it a run for its money, so to speak. So I think that's important. Like he's not using, there's a lot of dogs that they used in those days. Greyhounds are really old. Mastiffs are also a really old breed. And they had purposes for those dogs, like specific purposes. And so when he uses when I saw that greyhound, I was like, greyhound? Because the greyhound is a dog of speed. That's what it's for. It's about speed. And so it's, and it was bred into other dog breeds to give them speed.
I want to sit with this for a moment. Let's think through this greyhound image for a moment. And let's assume that I'm right, that the greyhound image is not there simply because he's trying to make an allusion to a historical figure of his time, but the greyhound image is doing more than that. Why is a greyhound an appropriate adversary to overcome the she-wolf?
Well, what Sherry was saying is great. So as opposed to say a guardian dog that would sit there and just make sure the wolf never comes and kills your livestock. The greyhound is not it's resolution, right? It's the final driving out. And one of the things that's been kicking around in this wolf discussion in my head is that it's a spiel Jordan Peterson's done many times talking about Genesis 1, but he talks about, there's the snake outside, and you drive the snake out, and you drive the snake out, and you drive the snake out, and you find out, oh wait, there's a snake inside. And so the she-wolf is sort of, as you're moving through these beasts, right? The she-wolf is the beast inside in that sense. And so what I think we see with the wolf, with the greyhound is it's not the systems that just make it okay that some people are bad and we deal with it, right? That's the livestock guardian. That's the police force. It's something else. It's the thing that lets every man live in peace under his own fig tree. It's the thing that kills the wolf inside of you, right? That drives it off so far it's never coming back, and we can all sit down in peace. And so the greyhound is the animal that doesn't that doesn't just hold bad things off. The greyhound is the thing that brings shalom.
Right. So is there even a hint? Is he even possibly hinting towards some sort of transformation, given the resemblance in terms of the physique?
Yes,
and
that's
the
a great
makeup
point.
of the lean and hungry wolf versus the lean greyhound. Like, is he hinting toward that this being accomplished through transformation?
That's a good question.
That's a good question, yeah.
Because there is, look, we all know. Sorry, sure, you go.
No, I was just going to say, I just wanted to add, there's also, there's no loyalty. The she-wolf has no loyalty. She's an opportunist, right? Whereas the greyhound is loyal. Like, you look back centuries and greyhounds always lay at the feet of the king, kind of thing, right?
Right.
So anyway,
where do dog? What? I mean, it's a dog, right?
Wolves.
Dogs come from wolves.
Yes, dogs come from wolves.
To me, it's like, wait a minute. The wolf is overcome by a dog.
Yes.
Yeah. And a dog that physically resembles the wolf in terms of its physique. It's like, to me, it's like, has to be hinting at a transformation.
This is the whole poem, though. Like, I'm sorry, I'm just going to say this.
Yeah, that's fine.
The whole poem is about how any image, rightly oriented, will lead you to the divine. That's the poem.
Right.
And so that is, so the greyhound and the wolf in that sense are like, it's the corrupt approach to the image, and it's the right approach to the image. And you're going to see this over and over in the poem where that switch happens, where it's the wolf to the greyhound, and like, look forward at the end of the Inferno, because that is the biggest switch, but they're all over. And even the structure of the poem itself, the fact that you'll see Dante describing all kinds of things in the everyday matter of life, right? That he's talking about something that's so far beyond us, but he's using a wolf and a greyhound, that like the stuff of everyday life. The very act of making the poem out of images is that process of transformation of the she-wolf into the greyhound.
Because this is what the poet's art is.
Okay, here's a thought, guys, before I lose it. It's also Eucharistic, that idea of that kind of transformation. Yeah. Because it takes the wild thing created by God in the wolf, and the greyhound is something that is made by men. Okay, it's a hybrid. It's bred for a purpose, like the bread. Okay, the wheat being made bread, and the grapes being made wine. So you take, like I talked a little bit about this with Martin Shaw, is that this is the domestication process.
Yes,
okay.
Domestication. Thank you.
This is what domestication does.
Yes.
Well, you also, but then also, like,
and
is the Eucharist? Sorry. It was the delay again.
Go ahead, guys.
I was gonna point out something rather obvious that needs saying anyway, which is that, well, like, the Eucharist is the meal that is offering to end your hunger forever.
Yes, and look, the domus. I mean, the domestication is the process of integrating into a household, right? And what is a garden? Most, like, gardens in particular, not a vegetable garden, but a garden is a domesticated forest, right? So we've got all this, like, you've got the dark wood and the she-wolf, and then we're going to end up in a garden, right? And it's like, and so in this sense, like, Dante is being domesticated, right? So what household is he being domesticated to? It's the household of God, right? Mm-hmm. It's the household of the saints, and he's not just scared, he's scared of the she-wolf because the she-wolf is him, like, he is the she-wolf, and the question is, how can he be brought out of that? How can he be domesticated? And this is all the prodigal son, right? Midway through this life's journey, I woke to find myself in a pig pen. Right? Isn't that the prodigal son? Like,
but the other thing, Ted. Yeah, but the other thing is, I want to point this out because it is the wild that forces us to be domesticated. Okay, yes. It is the wild the wild things forced us into communities, And that forced us to have a culture, right? Because as soon as you live in a community, and so then this is the picture I have from that first canto, is that, you know, like Nate put it, they're threshold guardians, right? They're like, no, you're not coming any further. You're not, you got to push into the darkness,
But
right? And that darkness is going to force him to become domestic, or and it's interesting because I think that this is what creation, like Sophia, if you think about creation as Sophia, this is the wisdom of God, okay? That his strength is made perfect in weakness. So your weakness is that you can't push past these threshold guardians. If you did, they'd rip you to shreds. So you have to move into the darkness. Yeah.
Right, and you can't do it you can't undergo the journey alone.
No, so you have to move into
undergoes the journey alone.
Community.
And how does he begin? Yeah. How does he begin? He begins with the hour before he turns to the eye, and then he follows a guide.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Well, and he says, you know, that he's going to go through this journey again for our sake, right? It was so painful, but because of the good things that came later, he wants to give us that, right? And so there's this beautiful thing of Virgil did it for him, now he's doing it for us. And this is, right, I think St. Paul says in one of his letters to the Corinthians, like, we comfort others with the comfort that we ourselves have received. And I listened to this great lecture by Dr. John Cuddebeck, and he was quoting all this stuff from Sirach, and one of them is, do not despise toilsome labor or farm work. And it was just this, and he goes into this notion of, Sherry, to your point, of the remedies, we're all very quick to dispense with the outcome of the fall. And he's like, we should not do that. You know, it's like, oh, toilsome labor from the fall. He's like, yeah, we were given that because of the fall. And so there's this notion of, if we're going to be saved, right, it's the first thing that happens to Dante is he's driven back into the woods, right? And he comes to Virgil, who's a ghost, and he calls him my author and my master, right? Like, it's such a place of humility that he has to take. I mean, this is, and what's interesting, Sherry, to think, because I know you've been thinking a lot about Job too, and all of your conversations with Jess. What's weird about this story is we're going to go further down in hell, but like Dante, for his own part, he's already at the bottom. We start at the bottom. That's one of the weird things about this story. Like, it opens in the belly of the whale. He's already there. The dark wood is the whale, right? He's already been eaten. We don't even get to know what he did.
And in fact, he tells us that he can't imagine death, even death itself, being more terrifying than what he's in.
Yeah, he's basically saying.
It's interesting because in the story that Fantastes that George MacDonald wrote, he starts it out with a Nodos heading out on this path that shows up, the path to fairyland, but instead of staying on it, he heads in a southerly direction. That's what George MacDonald writes, and that's exactly how this opens, is that he went off the straight path, right? Dante went off the path, and heading in a southerly direction is, obviously down, right? For a Nodos, it's a downward motion. And that's exactly, I like I said before, there are a few parallels that I see in Lilith and Fantastes and this poem. So, and I'm sure George MacDonald
is a really fun,
well aware of it.
Like wrapping it all together for the George MacDonald and Dante thing is that if you go and you read The Great Divorce by C.S. Lewis, George MacDonald gets Virgiled, right?
Yeah,
George MacDonald himself is C.S. Lewis's Virgil, and The Great Divorce, which is Lewis's homage to the Divine Comedy.
Absolutely,
so it's just really cool.
Right.
Like, everyone gets their turn.
Oh wow, I love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
So, do we want to try to tackle Canto II today or not?
I think I'd be hard pressed to be able to.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think maybe we'll just have to survive. We'll try to tackle Canto II next time.
This is rich fare. You know,
I think it might end up being 100 episodes. It might just be one canto per episode.
It's deceptive because they're like 100 to 150 lines each, and you think, oh yeah, we'll breeze through this. There's 100 of them. There's no way there's that much each one.
I thought two cantos per episode was a reasonable goal, and then I was immediately proved wrong. So yeah, guys, this is gonna be. I would like to do what I would like to do, just to lay out the arc of this series, is I would like to maybe in between episodes that are actually dealing with the text itself to weave in some other things on the overarching theme that I want to try to work with here. So
cool.
I thank you both for joining me today. I think this was a productive first episode. Hopefully we won't be as victimized by latency next time as we were this time.
Yeah. I would just like to say I have no idea how many times I've read the Divine Comedy, and just to the depth and the power of the text, to be able to sit down with both of you and be getting profound insight that I've never had from this. I mean, it's just like, there's just so much here. So
right. It's the power of dialogue, right?
Yes.
It's the power of dialogue. It's the power of dialogue. It's always there are always more insight to be gained when you're discussing something with good faith conversation partners. So dialogue itself is powerful. Mm-hmm. And then I think there's something to be said for like taking that approach to the text as of a spiritual exercise, the way in which Tomberg approaches the Arcanum of the Tarot. So that's my idea for this series, that we approach each canto as a spiritual exercise, come to the text to try to see with Dante.
Yeah.
And to talk about it.
Yeah.
To dialogue about it. So
wonderful.
Thank you for joining me for this first episode of our new series.
Yeah. Thanks, Nate.